welcome to Next Gen Finance, an SEB podcast about sustainable finance. My name is Lina Apsheva, I am your host, and today I am joined in the studio by my two fantastic colleagues, Fatima Khamis, an advisor in climate and sustainable finance, and Jacob Hansson, head of SEB Product as a Service Incubator for large corporates. Jacob and Fatima will tell us about the bank's work around circularity and share about some projects with a focus on circularity that they're currently working on. Circularity is such a fascinating subject, and I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into it. So without further ado, let's welcome Jacob and Fatima to the podcast. And would you mind just shortly introducing yourselves to our listeners?
My name is Fatima Khamis. I work in climate and sustainable finance, a part of sustainable banking. We are focusing a lot at product innovation, where one of the topics and themes that we are looking into is circularity.
My name is Jacob Hansson, and I'm with Asset Solutions in corporate banking. I have many years of leasing experience, and currently I'm heading the newly established Product as a Service Incubator within our team.
All right, but I'm sure that most of our listeners know what circularity is. But why don't we start, just in case, by explaining, really, what do we mean when we say circularity? So Fatima, could you lead us, or how do you say, start us off, I guess, on this topic?
Circularity is using the resources of our planet in a more efficient way. Today, with most businesses having a linear business model, where they produce something, sell it, and it usually just gets tossed in a bin, this is something that we need to change. We need to take care of our resources. We need to reuse. We need to repair our products. And we need to make sure that the lifespan of our resources is as long as possible. And we also need to recycle. We need to make sure that linear business models goes to circular and that the resources stays within a loop to create value for as long as possible.
Everyone talks about circularity and puts most of the sort of pressure on the recycling. And that is quite all right. But the problem is that if you only put your focus on the recycling, there is a scary situation that you actually start to recycle products that still can be used. And that's why these repair, reuse, remanufacturing part is so important, so that we can make sure that we should recycle the assets when it's at the end of life, but it should be when actually it cannot be used anymore.
Yes, very important subject indeed, because we simply cannot be consuming at the rate that we're consuming, right? Because we're simply polluting the planet. So I don't think that anyone would really argue with how important circularity is. But then the classic question that we often raise on this podcast is putting it into the context of banking. So we understand why circularity is important, but why is circularity important for a bank? And this is maybe a question to both of you.
There will be new investment opportunity that will be presented. We will see renewable energy growing, recycling, repair, waste management, and also new business models. So as a bank, if we understand these ventures, we will be able to find those really interesting opportunities and invest with them.
I see. And when you say circular economy as opposed to circularity, of course, it just means that the economy that is based on, instead of this linear model, a circular model, isn't it?
Exactly.
And as someone who's worked in leasing, Jacob, I imagine that that's something that's kind of relevant. Or why do you think that this topic is important for the bank?
First, I agree that from circularity comes the circular economy, and that's where we belong. That's where we have our possibilities, and where our both the products we have today, but also the future products will fit in perfectly. The circular economy is extremely big and a wide topic, I must say, and it's important to realize that there are different aspects, different needs within this circular economy. When you talk to the corporate clients today, many of them address the circular economy mostly from taking care of waste while producing, using fossil-free energy or being energy efficient. And of course, there are many that talk about the recycling aspects of it. But what's very often forgotten is the responsibility that lies within the assets or the physical products that you actually produce. And here is where the product as a service comes in, because this is something that actually enables the circularity aspect of taking care of the assets that are actually leaving the factory floor. And that's where there's something really interesting for us to take on.
Very interesting. And now that we've established why circularity is important for a bank, I'm wondering, Jacob, you as someone who has such an extensive experience in banking, what made you personally interested in the topic?
Well, I've, as I said, many years of leasing experience, and one of the largest costs you have in the leasing is the depreciation of the asset and reaching the level of value that the asset has over time. And that's why you, of course, realize that if you can actually prolong the lifetime of the asset and extend the usage of it, there is a possibility of taking down that cost. Much of the leasing business is still based on the linear way of thinking. I'd say that for me, it came pretty much clear about this when we came into the pandemic, when we had the shortage of material. There were semiconductors that made factories stop and so on. That's when you realize that parts of these things that are manufactured related to that there is a shortage. So I'd say that was when it came on to me, pretty much how important that is, the circularity in relation to manufacturing. I
want to quickly go back to, or maybe not so quickly, because this is actually a topic that we will talk about quite a bit, but you mentioned earlier, Jacob, product as a service, and I know that that's something that you've also worked with, Fatima. Could you elaborate a little on what product as a service is?
So this is a new way of working with products. Instead of just selling off your products and bringing home your bacon, you do it in another way. So in product as a service, the manufacturer will keep the product. The user will only use the product when they need it. So it becomes a lot more flexible for the user, and the manufacturer also will have a strong incentive to produce a good that has a long lifespan.
And what's interesting with product as a service is that normally when you have sustainable and circularity issues, it's on sort of the result and economic expense. But here you actually have a symbiosis, meaning that if the asset itself is made in a way that makes it last longer and perform better, there is a better possibility also for the equipment provider, being either the manufacturer or at least someone that has control of the asset, to be able to make the business model work even better because of the fact that the material is used or the product is used much longer or better.
When using a product as a service model, all consumers do not have to own their own product. They will share instead, and this will be a big benefit from an environmental angle.
When you think of circularity in these terms and what it means on the ground for manufacturers, for users of the products, then it becomes a lot easier to understand the role that the bank would play in the system, I think, because you start to understand how different the financing model would then have to be, isn't it? Jacob, you are the head of product as a service incubator for large corporates in SEB. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little more about this incubator and the idea that started it.
The incubator is the idea that came out of the strategy work that we did last year, where we, both within LC&FI and CMPC and sustainable banking, had rather extensive work being done in how the bank should support our clients in this matter. And it became pretty clear and essential that first there are many needs to take care of. There are different views on what this actually is and what role we should play in this product as a service market, if you put it that way. Pretty fast it was evident that we needed to have some sort of center of excellence to channel the questions that comes up, both from our clients and that could be both SMEs and large corporates, and as well as, of course, internal questions. we decided to go on and set up the incubator for the large corporates first. The demands from the small companies and the large companies vary a bit, and that's why it's important that we meet that in different ways, but where we still have a common way of addressing it, and where we also communicate together, so that we keep it together.
And when you say CNPC, you mean, of course, the corporate and private customer segment. Yes, and we will come back to the smaller companies a little bit later. But I was wondering, Jacob, if you could give us a few examples of the large corporates that you've worked with so far, so we can kind of paint a picture of how this works on the ground, so to speak.
Well, I've been focused very much on the manufacturing large corporates that we have in the Nordics. Where I've met quite a few now, and I feel that there is a high interest of this, and the reason why everyone wants to talk about this is of course the fact that this, as we said before, is supporting the circular aspects, but it's also based on two other strong trends that we have in the market, and the first one has been for quite some time, and that's the ownership versus usership trend, which means that many of the products that the large corporates and other manufacturers produce are very often sold as a lease or a rental rather than one-off, which is the normal way. And the need for this is growing, especially within the younger generations where you don't want to actually own things. And when you take on this second big trend that all the physical products produced today have multiple sensors and all the IoT technology that comes out of this, and you compare it with the third big thing, and that's the circularity issues. That's where you have the sort of the basics for setting out the product as a service. So I'd say that the large corporates are very well aware about this. They're interested in talking about it, but there are some difficulties in actually setting it off.
And would you mind just mentioning, or I don't know if you can, but mentioning a specific example, like let's say it's cars or solar panels or tractors?
Most of the as-a-service offerings right now have come furthest within the IT business. We have been seeing for quite some time now that we don't buy our computers anymore. I mean, they're always sort of delivered as a monthly payment per user. So there's an industry that's been doing this for a long time. Within the car business, you've had car sharing for quite some time. But the question is if it's fully really circular in the way that to be able to do that, you need to make sure that you actually start producing the cars in a more in the way that it extends the lifetime. Most of the offerings that are out there has been established before the circularity sort of trend has blown in. So this is much more evident for the ones that are doing it right now, is to take on the circularity. And I think that's extremely important to emphasize, that just because you actually offer a product as a service, that doesn't make it circular, because it only makes it circular if you take on the repairing, the refurbishment, the remarketing, and even the recycling of the assets, right? Without that, it's only a service that you offer.
Very interesting and important not to exaggerate, I guess.
I think it's extremely important to realize that unless you have what we call the R framework connected to the as a service offering, there is no evidence that you actually make it circular. And that's also a discussion I always have with the clients I meet, is that, as I say, when you do this and you're interested in setting this out as an offering, where is the circularity aspect? And if they cannot answer that questions, I ask them to come back and think about it.
That certainly sounds like one of the challenges that you'd encounter when trying to set up this type of model. I'm wondering, are there any other challenges that really stick out?
The main challenge that always comes up, especially when you ask from a banking perspective, is of course the financial stuff. For SMEs or smaller companies, it's very much a liquidity thing where this sort of draws capital. For the large corporates, it's also a financial issue, but here it's more often related to balance sheets discussions and the fright of losing or taking down KPIs or credit ratings. But when you come to the next level, when you have sort of come past the financial discussion or the financial issues, it's pretty evident, especially within the large corporate industry, that much of the hurdles that you need to pass are internal. Because setting off your products as a service rather than selling it linear in the traditional way, that means changes. That means changes for the different departments. And changing is generally something you are careful to do. You want to keep on doing what you know. And this is new. So so I hear lots of internal sort of discussions within the large corporate industry.
I can definitely see how that could be a challenge when it's a large organization. But going back to talking about smaller sized companies, Fatima, I know that you have background in working with small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs as I call them. How do you think it's different for SMEs when it comes to circularity?
I think you, Jakob, you already mentioned one of the biggest challenges that they will bump into. Being a small company, being a startup, you will have a problem with liquidity.
But hopefully at least small companies won't have this whole bureaucracy issue, right? So if they do want to change their business model to a circular one, maybe that would go faster for a smaller company.
Yeah, they can go faster. That's true. But it's also there are many issues. There are many questions to address, and that could also be difficult for a small company because normally you don't know you don't know the answer. Again, you know how to invoice a sold asset, but suddenly taking on new risks in invoicing recurring revenue or a pay-per-use structure, that is something new. And how do you even put that into your accounting, and what kind of legal issues might there be? So there are many questions for the smaller companies also to address. So yeah, many hurdles to pass. And of course, as Fatima says, we are also used to the normal, if you put it that way, the old traditional business model. And this is new also for us. So we need to find out how to also adapt to this new way of doing business for our clients. Because our normal traditional financing solutions, they also need to sort of be scrutinized and see, can we do it in another way? Because we're also tradition in our way of thinking.
Absolutely. And now that we've covered the challenges and the hurdles, I'm wondering, what are the main driving forces behind this change?
The main driving forces are, as I see it, the three trends: the ownership versus usership trend, the technology development that relates to all these sensors that you can use in both picking up the asset data as well as the usage data, and making that possible to actually both follow, fix, and invoice what the asset is doing. And then, of course, the third one being the circularity, where you can actually enable circularity issues. Those are the three mega trends that are the basics for the as a service offering.
What about regulation? How is the regulatory environment looking, at least in the EU, when it comes to circularity? I wonder, Fatima, if you could share some thoughts.
Yeah, the regulatory landscape is changing. There has been a lot of directives that has been around for a while, especially looking into different materials like plastics. There has been waste frameworks and eco-design directives and so on. And now we see that some new things are coming in. Circularity has found its way into taxonomy, And now everything is getting more concrete. What is circularity and how should we handle it? We also see it in CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Regulatory Directive, that it's time to look at whether circularity is material for your business or not. So we see that there's several steps coming. So now it's time for the large corporates to start report on their sustainability. And one of the topics in that work will be to see whether circularity is material for your business or not.
Absolutely. And it's always interesting to see how the regulatory space develops and how it affects the views in the market. And I'm wondering, Jacob, you've talked so much with the large corporates, and they are the ones who will be affected first by CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. What is the response that you've heard on the regulatory changes, but also around circularity in general?
This is complex. It's complex to follow. It's difficult to realize or know exactly how to report this. And I also think that here is where our support comes in. Because if we can support our clients in how to report and how to follow this up in a correct way, I'm sure that they will be very happy with that. So again, when they want to offer their products as a service, there are lots of questions that they need to sort of find out themselves. But in relation to the financial issues, like what kind of financial impact does this kind of offering mean to them, and as well the how to report from a circularity or sustainability perspective, I'm sure that we can support. That's where we have lots of our knowledge.
So it certainly sounds like there's a lot to look forward to in the future when it comes to circularity. And I'm wondering, what are your expectations when it comes to the future of circularity, especially in the context of banking?
If I start, I can say that, circularity is here to stay. We can and we should make an impact by being able to reward our clients that actually take this on in a good way. And furthermore, I think that the circularity will start new businesses, new companies will come out of this. And it's extremely important that we're there to support them as well as the companies that work in the traditional way, because it's new. And as before, when something new starts, we should be the bank that supports this new business. We will see companies specialized in recycling, logistics and storage, for example, storage of goods and parts, which are new for us, and they are also in need of normal banking products.
Looking at circularity, I think that we will find a lot of newcomers. We will find the producers of new materials. We will find the companies that will enable the full transition to circular economy. There will be several enablers there to make sure that we can really close that loop.
Sounds great. And always happy to talk about different ways in which we can, undertake this journey to a more sustainable society. And I think that circularity and the product as a service is a great example of how sustainability can be integrated into business and how we can change traditional business models and the role that banking needs to play. We have a lot of bank employees listening to this podcast, so I'm sure that some of them will be wondering, okay, how can I kind of integrate this type of thinking into my line of work? And I'm wondering if you have any advice to our listeners on where to start when thinking about this topic.
I would say be curious and collaborate. Don't hesitate to reach out to a colleague of yours, or to reach out to us, or to reach out to other companies. There's a lot of curious people out there. There's a lot of knowledge, and we can learn so much from each other.
With all these questions that you stand before you start doing this, I tend to say, okay, think about 5 things. What asset are you talking about? What is it you want to offer? What will be in that offer? That's a second. What is the client base you're going for, and in which geography are you? And second, or fifth and not least, is where is the circularity in this? Because otherwise, if you don't have that in mind, this model won't fly for the future.
Thank you so much both for taking your time to come into the studio and talk to me and talk to our listeners. And good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
And as always, a big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, you can reach out to us with questions or suggestions for future episodes via our email, nextgenfin, without any dots in between, @seb.se. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast or add it to your favorites, depending where you're listening to us on. This way, you will always stay up to date when new episodes are published. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and goodbye.